Welcome to What the World Needs Now with hosts Tom Whisinnand and Josh Monroe. We hope you're able to leave feeling encouraged and ready for another day of changing lives in the field of education as we speak with inspirational teachers from across the nation and world about what keeps their spark lit.
In this episode, Claudine James shares her passion about engaging students and the whole community any way she can. Without any further ado, Claudine James.
Claudine, thank you so much for joining us tonight and being here with us. For those that are listening that don't know who you are and don't know your story, could you give us a little bit about who you are, what's your role in education, and what's a little bit of your story?
I am a lifelong educator. And the reason I say that is because I've never wanted to be, well, I actually have wanted to be something other than an educator, but that's what I initially wanted to be. I have a little When You Grow Up book that my parents kept, like, what did you do, first grade, second grade? Every year it asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Kindergarten, it said a teacher. So I've kind of swayed from that a little bit over the years. One time I wanted to be an accountant because I realized that had to do with money. And another time I wanted to be a fashion designer. And then I realized that in Central Arkansas, where I live at, there's really not a need for a big fashion designer. So I changed my thought pattern and I went back to teacher. Before I became a public school teacher, I owned and operated a daycare for 15 years. And so I got to use what I had originally went to school for, was accounting. And then after 15 years with my daycare, I went back to school and I got my certification for teaching. So this is my 12th year in middle school. So I have 27 years combined in education that I got paid for. Now, before that, I was trying to educate my brothers and sisters, and my parents did not pay me for that. And I don't think that I was obviously very successful, but I think I need to have some kudos for trying to educate my brothers and sisters as well. I teach English middle school, and I'm also the district community cultural liaison. And I just am out in the community, involved, trying to help with cultural awareness and cultural responsive teaching, making the community aware of our district's efforts in that accord. And then I also am on several board of directors for several organizations. And so I just try to be what I want my students to see as a potential, and not only an educator, but a community leader.
Claudine, I have to tell you, we were talking a little before, and I'm just absolutely thrilled that you took some time and are talking to Josh and myself, because if there is an educator that really embodies the outreach, like you were saying, or going out to the community and meeting community members where they are, meeting your students where they are, I think you do a phenomenal job of that. So if you would just talk a little bit about how you have started reaching the middle school kids, and a little bit about that endeavor, and how you reach other members of the community using technology and other things, that would be great.
So this is like a news flash, or one of those things that you don't tell everyone, but I actually live in the same community in which I actually teach. I've lived in the same community my entire life of 50 plus years. And I've always saw the need for education. But once I became a middle school educator, I saw that there was a need for inspiring students. When I had my daycare, it was easy because, like, you were the one that fed the kids and, helped them use the bathroom. So they just automatically loved you. You were the one that got the playground equipment that the kids loved, and everyone wanted to stay at the, daycare. But when I entered middle school, I had to find that niche in order to draw my students in. What would make them enjoy learning? What would make them want to take interest in what I was presenting to them? And you know what I thought about? I thought about my own sons. I have 3 sons. 2 are graduated from college, proud mom, and 1 is in his last semester of his senior year. So I thought about the success of my own boys and what did I do with them. They might not always have agreed with what I did, but I always gave them a reason or a ultimate goal. Like if you do this, then you know that you'll have this coming. If you do this, this will happen. And so that's the way I do with my own classroom. Is I actually treat my students just like they are my own kids, whether they're male or female, no matter what color, sexual orientation, it doesn't matter. I treat them as if they were my own students. And one of the things that I get out of that is I get respect. They respect me and I respect them. This is my 12th year of teaching, and I promise you, I have probably not written up 12 kids.
Mm.
I don't have to worry about discipline because I respect the students and they see that and they respect me. Now, I'm not going to tell you Johnny does not act like the school terror in another class, but he will come in my class and act like a totally different student. And so I think that's one of my success stories. And a lot of educators don't buy into that because they see their students as their students
Mm.
instead of seeing their students as this really probably could be my child.
Mm.
This could be my grandson. This could be my granddaughter. What would I want them to do? So you just treat your students like they are yours. And so that has been my success story in buying into my kids buying into me. And when I say my kids, I mean my students. And as far as the community, you don't think about it very often, but if you really, really think about it, the role of a teacher is so awesome and it's so important, and we have a lot riding on our shoulders. And the main reason is because if we don't get it right with these kids, what is our future going to look like? Because when we retire, the students that we taught, they're going to be the leaders, you know? Or are they going to be put into the Social Security pot?
Yeah.
You know, are they going to be at the nursing homes that we may be in? Or are they going to be running the government that we are counting on protecting us? So what we put into our students is what we're going to get out of our own future. And so I have the potential in my classroom to make each of my students become something that's not even in their wildest dreams. And that is what I feel like I am tasked to do every day. I make mistakes in my classroom every day, but I come back the next day willing to try and learn again. And that's what I try to instill in my students as well. I'm one of those teachers that I have like lasting relationships with my students. Like, for instance, I have a student that actually graduated from college, and I went to her college things that she plays in, things that she done in college. Debut at church. I'll go to church with the student if they, say that they want me to come. Or students don't have a parent or something to come to a basketball game or a choir concert or a band. And so I guess you can say I adopt my students. And because one of my students said this, and she said, in Miss James' classroom, we become one, and all of us are brothers and sisters. And in her room, we really found out what love is really about. And so I tell everyone, uh, in students, parents, or whatever, in 202, there's a whole different world. When you step into 202, that's my room number. Things are a little different in 202. And I expect for you to treat everyone in the classroom with respect, including me, including the other students, and not to judge. I have this huge poster that says, "Don't judge me because you don't know my story." And I tell my students that because sometimes I'll tell them something about my personal life, and they was like, "Oh, I didn't know that." Like I used to be shy when I was your age. I didn't talk when I was in the 7th and 8th grade. I mean, I was smart, but I was just smart. I didn't talk. I didn't try to make waves or anything. So with that, I try to instill in my students that they can be change makers. And a change maker is someone who is going to make a change, whether it be a change that you're going to make in your classroom or a change you're going to make in our city, our state, or even globally. But you have the ability to be a change maker. It may be something as simple as your family having, I'm going to use the word prehistoric ideas about race and gender. And you can be the one to help people in your family realize that everyone doesn't need or deserve to be judged at all. Or it could be a change maker. I actually had a couple of students that I was tasked with finding some students to be on the very first time in our community, being on a county-wide advisory group, and they were my students that I picked, and we needed to have technology in one of our community group meetings because we wanted it to be interactive. We wanted to go Facebook Live, and we wanted to advertise it on, Twitter and Instagram and all of that. And here were my students over here just taking over the entire project. And the county judge looked and he was like, that's what we want because those are our leaders. And so I not only do I honestly teach English, but I teach so much more than just reading and writing. This past year, 20, gosh, you almost want to forget 2020. I was about to skip over it and go back to 2019. It was actually in 2020 that I was chosen the James T. Atkinson Arkansas History Teacher of the Year. I don't teach history, I teach English. But because of how I incorporate local and state history into my English curriculum, then I was chosen and I won the History Teacher Award. And that is one of the things that my students absolutely love. I'll never forget introducing a book about Japanese internment. And this girl walks into my room and she picks up the book and she throws it on my desk and she was like, "Why didn't you tell me this was such a horrible story?" And I was like, "It's not a horrible story." And she's like, "It is. This is horrible what happened." And she said, "But why is it that I am in the 8th grade in English and I'm finding out about this horrific time in our history?" Because very few students even know that there were 2 internment camps, Japanese internment camps in the state of Arkansas. You thought that they were all along the West Coast in California, Oregon, Arizona. There were 2 camps in Arkansas. And it was because there was land that was rich right there on the Delta, and they were there. So I teach about those things: Japanese internment, Holocaust education. We have National Day of Remembrance, Native American History Month, Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month. I try to incorporate every single holiday or special month event that I can because I want to emphasize diversity and inclusion, because with that is also helping my students to become change makers. And to I always tell my students to be the change that you want to see in the world. If you want the world to change, you work towards being that change. You can't change everybody else, but what if they see you do that? And then they come back and they're mimicking what you're doing. And so that's one of the things that I feel like is successful for me, and also gives me the opportunity to have my students to present in the community, to do all kinds of things in the community. And that's one of the things that I really hated about 2020 and COVID, because that took me and my students out of the community. And so I'm tasked now with finding different avenues of doing that. In April of 2020, my students were supposed to be doing this amazing exhibit at the local community college that we've done for 7 years in a row. The exhibit is so huge, it takes 4 days for us to have it. Everybody from the whole entire community, the school district buses over, all of the students from grades 3 through 8, and about 40 of my eighth graders present. We present books that we've read. We present history, literature, just sort of like it's like a culturally rich humanities project, you know? And so we were looking forward to that. I mean, I had one student that said, I remember seeing this project when I was in the third grade, and I was hoping I would be in your classroom in the eighth grade. And the project went astray. And so we weren't able to do that. And that's one of the things that I have, I guess you can say, brought attention to my students and my classroom and my motto and what I try to do as far as incorporating more than one content area into my curriculum.
That's awesome, because you're taking everything. And being an English teacher and winning the history teacher award, holy cow, that's awesome. I mean, in our district, we focus on something called 3D teaching, and it's where you teach, you're teaching one subject, but you're doing cross-cutting content. And you're taking different things and weaving them together, and you're doing that in so many amazing ways. I almost want to say you're doing 4D teaching.
Well, and I am so blessed that I work in a district that has basically helped cultivate that for me, you know, and embraced it and saw it as a way of engaging the students. And that's also one of the reasons that I was given the task of being the community cultural liaison, so that I can branch out and help other teachers learn how to incorporate. I say in just short, sort of like a global classroom is what I sort of envision of having. In fact, I guess it was 2 years ago, we did a back and forth exchange with a classroom in Africa. And so, and that's something I want to look forward to. But I've had to kind of change how I am. Or we were talking about my students doing the project in April. Well, COVID came and the schools were shut down. So I was trying to think, when that happened, what could I do to still bring my students into the community and let them highlight what they've learned. And I came up with nothing. I wanted to do maybe a virtual exhibit, but my kids had checked out. They were, you know, and I almost wanted to check out too. And I thought, I have to do something. I have to do something. So what I did was, as part of my curriculum, we wrote poems for National Poetry Month, but we called our poems COVID poems. And they got a chance to write about their reaction to the pandemic, how they were feeling about not going to school, how they were coping with, you know, social distancing, because at that time we were shut down, you know, go bare minimum places, and it was barely anywhere to go because everything was shut down. And so my students actually wrote poems, and so I instantly contacted the local newspaper, and I was like, hey, you probably don't have a sports section, you know, the entertainment section is probably down. Do you have room for some local school news? And the editor's like, yes. And so I had 42 of my students' poems that were printed in the newspaper, and they were called our COVID poems. But they were enlightening. And I'm so glad that they were able to do that, because that's going to be a part of them preserving this history. And I keep telling my students that every day. I was like, y'all, write about this. You guys, I need for you to remember this time, because you're going to look back 20 years from now and you're going to wish that you had knowledge of this, because it's going to be history. And you don't know that little, I gave everyone a little journal. That little journal may be like the notes you use to write your next book, you know, or the notes that you do to do this TV miniseries on. So keep these notes, keep up with that. And so that is part of culturally responsive teaching, but it's also helping my students with social emotional learning, because not only does it help them think about what's going on? It makes them think deeply about it, because when they write about it, they end up sharing all kinds of insightful things. And honestly, it helps me too, because I realize that, you try not to act human when you're in the classroom, but
Right.
you really are. You
You know,
really are.
I was curious about that because these students are really struggling. There's a lot of teachers that are struggling, and you get on social media and you read about it, and there's newspaper articles coming out about it, and it's on the news about how teachers are struggling. And so I was curious, where do you go? Like, where do you find that inspiration? Are there books that you've read? Are there certain individuals that you look to for that inspiration?
For the inspiration, just to be an inspiration to my students.
Yeah, right. How do you keep that going?
I really can say books, because and that this year I haven't traveled at all.
Mm,
Like, I haven't left the state, which is a good thing. But guess what? I've been to Chicago, Atlanta, Washington, Pakistan,
mm,
um, China, all these different places in the books that I've read. And so I try to highlight that to my students. Like, you don't have to go anywhere. These books motivate you. They help you see so much of what's going on in the world. And when you see that, then that helps you process what you're thinking about as well. One of the, I think, I guess for right now, the year isn't complete, but one of the most successful lessons I've had since we started back to school in August was allowing my students to read John Lewis's graphic novel March. And it opened up so much dialogue. So much dialogue. And the students were like, oh, we're going to have to do questions on this. And I was like, just read it, just read it, just read it. Because, they always want to know the end product.
mm,
Just read. And at the end, I didn't ask them one single question about comprehension.
mm.
Like, because it was a graphic novel, even my lowest level learners are going to be able to comprehend that if it's nothing else from the visual. But their ending was they had to answer 3 questions about reading that novel. What did you see depicted in this novel about nonviolence that made you realize that John Lewis and a lot of the people that work with him were actually nonviolent? Did you know about this before you read this? The second question was, what about this novel makes you think about a modern day issue? And thirdly, what modern day issue do you feel like that you would be willing to protest and stand up for? So that's how you start turning those chains in your students' mind so that they can be change makers, because they have to see it in the book that they read in the room. And then once you take that from the literature, then you make it applicable to your own life. And because I teach reading and writing, and I think I'm pretty good at that. I'm on TikTok. I'm that English teacher on TikTok, and so I think I'm pretty good at teaching them how to write. I find the best books, and I spend my money buying the books because I feel like they are so good that I want them to read them so bad. But I can do all of this grammar and teach them how to write and expose them to all this literature. But at the end of the day, if they don't have the mindset of being better or making our world a better place, I don't want to teach. I want to do something else, because that's what I feel like I have to do, is do my part in helping make the world better. And that's what I love about teaching, because we sit back and we're teachers, and we really can say that we make all other professions possible. Yeah.
That's awesome. Uh, and you talk a lot about all these things that you're doing with your community, and then you started touching on some of the things that you're doing in your class. And so I want to go off script a little bit, because reading's an area that I want to grow in as a teacher, and I want to get better. And so you mentioned that kids come in, and what's the end product? What am I going to have to do to get a good grade? How do you motivate kids to just love reading beyond the relationships that you're building with them, and beyond creating this family environment? How do you get them to just love books? What are some things that you do?
You know what? You shouldn't have asked me that question, because I have a very good answer for that question.
Good.
When I was 13, I wanted to make some extra money. And so my grandmother sold Avon. And she let me take out a couple of orders and deliver them for her and collect the money. I was like, wait a minute, I could do this. And so I told my mom. And she said, well, you're not old enough to sell Avon. You can't sign up. And I was like, Mom, would you sign up and put it in your name? And she's like, okay. Well, within a year, I was selling more than my grandmother was. She was kind of mad about it. But and then when I was 16, I was the #1 Avon salesman in our county. And so I was thinking, how has Avon got anything to do with this? Just wait, watch. Guess how I was able to sell so much? I offered testimonials. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And so my brother used the deodorant, my sisters used the lip gloss and the cologne. You know, my stepdad used the whole family used everything, the chapstick, the Skin So Soft. We were like using those products. So when someone asked me about the product, I was like, oh yeah, that deodorant is 24 hours because my brother needs it and it lasts 24 hours. And I tell teachers this all the time, and most of them do not listen to this advice. But the best way to get your students to read is the same exact reason, or not reason, the same exact way that I became the #1 Avon salesman. I use the product. Mm. So if you don't read the book, you cannot sell the book. But I'll pick up a book, and before I introduce the book in my classroom, we go over vocabulary, and so that vocabulary won't hinder comprehension. Mm-hmm. We go over history that's related to the book, so that, again, you're trying to do everything you can to aid in the comprehension of that book. So, for instance, when we read the book about Japanese internment, it is a graphic novel called They Called Us Enemy by George Takei from Star Trek. He was actually in the Japanese internment camp in Arkansas as a small child. And so his book is called They Called Us Enemy. And everybody was always, why do you have a globe in your room if you teach English? The first thing I did with that globe is talked about those camps on the West. And that made sense because if you came across the sea, the ocean from Japan, that's where you would end up, in California and those states on the West Coast. How did you end up in Arkansas? But I use a globe to show that. So I make all those connections. And once you make those connections, and then I just tell about the story. Like when I was introducing the book to my students, I give my own testimony. I was like, God, I was almost through reading the book, but anytime I buy a book, I also buy the audio. And I was like, but I had to go to the grocery store. So I put the audio in my car, drove to the grocery store, and I'm sitting in the car listening to it because I'm almost at the end. And I started crying. I was just bawling because it was at the end and it was so emotional, and her family and all this. And then I was like, get out of the car, Claudine, you're going to get groceries. And I get out of the car, and guess what happened? I locked my keys in the car because I was so into that book. And then I went in the grocery store, called Mr. Rescue to come unlock the car. I went on in there and got my groceries. By the time I came out, he was sitting in my car. I was like, so every time I pick up this book, I'm going to think about Mr. Rescue, and I'm going to think about how emotional I was. Now, don't you think after I told that story, everybody wanted to read the story because they wanted to figure out what got my attention so much that I locked the keys in my car? And so you have to be able to sell the product. So don't pick up a book and he's like, oh yeah, it was a New York bestseller, and then you pass it out to your kids. Don't do that. You pick up the book, you read it, because sometimes because it's a New York bestseller doesn't mean it may not be something that you need to present to your students, or it may not be something that is uh, they're able to grasp.
Right.
So that is my long story about how to motivate students, and you have to be motivated yourself. And
I'll
that's
buy
what,
some Avon.
huh?
I'll buy some Avon. Sign me up.
But that's what my sons always say. It's like, Mom, you're the biggest drama queen. But I'm not a drama queen. I'm just a highly engaged person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's absolutely incredible. And I will never forget the connection between Avon and reading now. I think that is absolutely remarkable. But you're right. You're so right. How many times do we pick up a piece of literature, pick up a curriculum, and just throw it at kids and put it on their desk or put it in their hands, and don't really do the service of getting them interested and getting them motivated. So
that goes with a lot of things in teaching, is that we got to model it for kids. If we want kids to do it, we better be doing it ourselves.
And so that's why I'm on TikTok.
Talk to us. How'd you get involved with TikTok? Tell us the story, Claudine.
So basically, it was like a dare, because I teach virtually some, and I also teach in person. Well, the students I was sitting in their work to Google Classroom, and then when I was sitting to Google Classroom, I would also put a video up, and I would put it on YouTube. Well, I would go and look at the YouTube link. It would be no hits. It would say 0 views. I'm like, you guys aren't even watching this. I'm like, how are you doing the work? So when those students came back, because those were students that were quarantined, I asked them, I was like, y'all finished the lesson? Mm-hmm. You watched all the video? Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. How is it that it says video views 0, and, like 4 of y'all said y'all watched it, and another class, 6 people in there? How did that counter never change? And they was like, oh, I don't know, Miss James. I don't know. I was like, y'all weren't watching it, were you? And so they say, well, we don't really like YouTube. I say, well, okay, I'll put it on Facebook. Miss James, Facebook is for old people. I was like, okay, well, what do y'all do? And they was like, oh, we just watch, we're just on TikTok. I was like, TikTok? What's that? And somebody showed, I was like, oh, why y'all doing all that dancing on there? And they was like, Miss James, you gotta do that. I was like, okay. So I told one of the students, like, get your phone out. And they was like, what are we gonna do? I was like, I want to make a TikTok. And Grandma's like, you can't talk that fast. And I said, what do you mean? It's like, it has to be 59 seconds. I was like, 59 seconds? And they was like, okay, Miss James. And so I said, I'm gonna do it. And they recorded me doing a lesson, and I put it on. So after I put it on, I was like, y'all, what does this mean? I was like, is this just like followers, like friends on Facebook? And they said, yeah. And I said, okay, well, will y'all follow me? They was like, we're not following you. I was like, yo, how am I gonna have followers? I said, it says followers, and the other one says likes, right? I said, are y'all gonna like it? Yeah, we'll like it, but we're not gonna follow you. I was like, come on, y'all. I was like, follow me, because aren't followers and likes, the more you have, doesn't that make you look good? It's like, oh yeah, but we're not following you. I was like, oh, okay. And so I started on a Monday, and by Friday I had 10,000 followers, and about the following Monday I had 12,000. And everyone said, Miss James, will you follow me? No, I will not. Sorry. Why y'all want me to follow you now? And they were like, oh, you're blowing up. Miss James, please follow me. Nope, not following you. And I don't follow any of my students. And they are so furious at me for that. And someone was like, Miss James, just give me a shout out. Like, put my name in one of your videos. I don't know you.
I love your TikToks. I watch them, you post them, and I watch them, and I think they are absolutely fantastic. And the way you hit that 59 seconds with the grammar, I've learned something about, all the time that I watch them, I learned something. So thank you for putting them on TikTok.
Well,
I think
thank
it's fantastic.
And that's what I love about yours too, is that they're so educational. There's a lot of teachers on that kind of weave away from the educational path. And
I know. And so that's the crazy thing, because I was telling my dad the other night, he said, well, how can you grow? And he's like, well, look at other teachers. And I was like, other teachers are just doing non-teacher stuff. And he was like, "So are you the only one on there trying to make the world be smarter?" And I was like, "Probably not, but I think I'm the only one on here trying to do the most in 59 seconds." And it is a lot of other teachers on there. I saw some math teachers, and I think a couple of grammar teachers. But the kids told me they wanted me to be known as the grammar queen. So I am going to be known as I'm that English teacher on TikTok. Hashtag grammar queen.
Grammar, I love it.
I like it. Your own hashtag.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to get it trending
Whatever.
soon.
And my kids, I let them produce the videos. And so I think one day it was one on there, and somebody's like, "You're feisty today," but my regular videographer was gone, and I let another student produce it, and he's like, "Oh no, he's like, go faster." He's like, "Have some pep." And I was like, "No," and he's like, "Well, I'm not recording." And I was like, "Okay," and I was all jittery, so he's like, while I was recording, he was like, up, up, up. And so, but I love that because that's again meeting my students where they're at, coming into their world, and they don't even know what they're learning. You know, they don't even know that. I looked on my TikTok earlier, and I had a parent, and she was like, "Now I see why why my kids like you, and they call you Mama Jane." And she's like, "I'm following you," and again, bringing in the community, bringing in the community.
And I love how you said you're meeting your students where you are, because at least for me, that journey came because of COVID, and having to figure out a different way to get our students to interact with us when they didn't have to.
I have loved this time with you, Claudine. Thank you so much for being with us and inspiring us with your stories of how you reach the community and the students you teach. And the last question we ask guests is, what does the world need now?
I think that what the world needs now is the same thing that I try to teach in my classroom. It's like empathy. You know, and it goes along with "Don't judge me, you don't know my story." And before we were out, one of my students had came back from being quarantined because she had COVID, but she came back. Her whole entire family had it, and so did her grandparents. And her grandfather died on Christmas Day. And so, you know, I want to be there for her, and I hate that happened and it's COVID, because normally the normal me, I would have went to her house and taken my famous cheesecake, you know, when someone in the family passes, and maybe even attended, you know, some of the services, because that particular grandfather, I think I've taught 3 of his grandkids. And so empathy.
Yeah, there can't ever be too much of that in the world.
No.
It's definitely a place that we all need to grow.
Definitely.
Well, Claudine, thank you so much for being here. It was an absolute joy to get to know you, to hear your story. I'm inspired. We sit down and we probably say it every week, but every night that after we record, I'm ready for the rest of the week. I get pumped. Going to start looking for opportunities to try to get my class into the community more based on the things that you're saying. So thank you for inspiring us and giving us ideas that we can take into our own classroom and to keep our spark lit.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. You all have a blessed evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. Thanks for tuning in this week. Hopefully you're ready for another week of changing lives. We're so thankful and appreciative that you took time to listen to our guest, Claudine James.
We hope that as you head out, you remember that the biggest factor that plays into student success is you. Your love, your passion, your empathy. Your dedication is exactly what the world needs now. Thanks for all you do. Have a good one.